So we've been through Milgram's aim and Milgram's procedure. So as you can see in the pictures, you've got Stanley Milgram on the right. In the middle at the top, you've got the setup of the experiment. On the left is the participant and Mr. Williams strapping down Mr. Wallace. Bottom left is Mr. Williams giving a test shock to the participant. They got a test shock of 45 volts to increase the internal validity of the study, so participants thought they were giving real shocks. Bottom in the middle is a shock generator, so it went from 15 volts to 450 volts. And bottom right is a participant showing signs of distress while he's carrying out the study. So all of this is in your booklet on page 22 and 23. So once you can describe Milgram's study, you need to be able to evaluate it. Now, some psychologists say that the lab is not a good place to study obedience because the unfamiliarity causes more obedience in the face of uncertainty. But Milgram doesn't believe in this. He feels that if there's an authority figure, obedience will occur anywhere. So that's how he justified his results of the experiment. And if Milgram is correct, his results need to be replicated outside of the lab. So in your booklet on page 22, there is a task which refers to Hoffling study. Hoffling study is a field experiment looking at obedience in nurses. The detail is on the slide there. And if you look in your booklet on page 22. So Hoffling found high levels of obedience in a real life setting. One criticism of Milgram's study is that he only used male participants. Hoffling's study is good to use as a comparison for this because he only used female participants. He found higher levels of obedience than Milgram did. However, we can question the ability to generalize this, so we can argue that this might lack population validity. Most studies have found no gender differences in obedience, but you can use Hoffling studies to support Milgram, and then you can evaluate Hoffling study itself within your A03. In page 26 of your booklet, there are some ethical objections to Milgram's study. People have criticised Milgram, however, he did not expect the results he got. He expected about 1% of participants to give 450 volts, not 65%. Subjects were told they had the right to withdraw. They could take the payment without having to do the experiment. They were free to leave at any point. They were debriefed afterwards. But it's the deception and it's the psychological harm that you can argue that is an ethical objection to it. Milgram said that most of his participants were pleased to have taken part, however. In your booklet, there is a task about internal validity. Milgram argues that there was high internal validity, that the participants weren't just playing along, they were actually obeying the experimenter. In terms of also evaluating Milgram, you can use other bits of research. So if you're asked to outline and evaluate research into obedience to authority, Milgram is your research because that's named on the spec, but Hoffling or other studies, Riker and Haslam's study, Berger's study, can be used to evaluate Milgram as well. And briefly outline and evaluate the findings. So that would be Milgram's study. So it's 65% of 40 male participants gave 450 volts, 100% gave 300 volts. That would be your outline of your findings, and then you would evaluate those findings. There was a replication done by Jerry Berger, which is this guy here, that's worth looking up to see the results of his findings. And also, in a non-psychological fashion, there is a Darren Brown program called Push to the Edge, which demonstrates the concept of obedience that Milgram found in his study. So when we look at replications of Milgram, when we look at what Milgram identified as factors that made people obey, there is a Darren Brown program called Push to the Edge, which demonstrates these, which is worth a watch.